From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Here's what's ahead. K-State's Glynn Tonsor is featured in this week's Cattle Market segment. He'll share comments he made on the cattle market outlook at K-State's Cattlemen's Day last Friday. And Glynn talks about what a new trade deal with China could mean for the beef cattle sector. Then for you, the first of this week's profiles of the 5 Kansas farm couples who've been named to the 2018 class of Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers. Today, the story of Gary and Becky Hatesohl of Washington County. And later, Jeff Wickman has this week's Kansas 4-H segment. He'll visit with K-State's Deryl Waldren as they preview the Kansas 4-H SpaceTech Training coming up soon in Salina. All that here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
This is the Monday edition of Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. And as always, we're glad to have you tuned in. For this week's Cattle Market Insight, we bring by once more livestock economist Glynn Tonsor of K-State Research and Extension. And Glynn is fresh off a presentation at the 2019 Cattlemen's Day at K-State, and we're going to ask him to reiterate some of the things he shared with the audience there as we visit today. But looking back on the trades this past week, Glynn, a little ground gained in the fed cattle trade.
Yeah, so it started in the wholesale meat category and carried over to fed cattle. We'll break that down, and we'll do it in that order, actually. So the wholesale cutout choice was up $2 for the week at $2.21, and select was up a full $4 for the week. We're now at $2.17. I will note both of those are up a little over $5 for the year, and that's important if you understand why fed cattle prices have been coming up. So in that spirit, we'll take cash 5-market fed cattle, traded at $128, fairly low volume again this week, but that's about $1.50 higher, and that series is up $5.50 for the year. And the reason I'm telling the story this way is that's directly consistent with the cutout numbers. The live cattle CME contract traded just under 130. We did break 130 intraday during the week. It's of note because we hadn't done that before, but 129.5 is where we closed on Friday. That's up about $1 for the week, and that contract's now up about $4 for the week. So before I transition over to feeders, I think it's really important to understand we still have some strong demand signals. They're showing up at the wholesale cutout numbers, and it's carrying over into live cattle trade.
But the feeder side is something of a different story.
It is. On the board, the March feeder cattle contract, a little over 141, closed on Friday, down $2 for the week, and now down about $4 for the year. Cash trade here in Kansas was down $2 to $4, depending on what weight class you would look at. Specifically, the Salina report, there was one lot of 36 head at 630 pounds, 158 is what they went for, and then a bigger lot of 287 head at 825 pounds, went for 137. Fairly flat, down just a hair compared to the prior week in those two cases. If you want to understand at least why I think feeder cattle prices are down while fed are up, there's 2 big reasons. One is cost of gain in the feedlot is going up as we speak. I walked over here today, put a hat on. It is cold outside. That is not good for feedlot performance, and that's clear to everybody. But if you raise the cost of gain, people are going to depress feeder cattle prices when that occurs. Moreover, and probably more importantly, because this has been going on for a longer time, is when you look out 4 to 8 months, the fed cattle prices we're expecting are notably lower than we have now. So, for example, the August and October fed cattle contracts, CME contracts, are trading $116. That's a full $13 to $14 back from the current April. And there's a host of reasons why that is. But if you run a feed yard and you're looking to sell at a much lower price than we have today, you're going to embed that in what you're paying for feeder cattle. So both the profitability from a revenue perspective as well as the profitability from a cost perspective in the feedlot is depressing feeder cattle prices as we speak.
So when you look at the feeder cattle side further, do you think that this is a sustained drifting lower or just a brief step back?
Well, one of these days we're going to get out of the weather funk and things will dry up and so forth, and probably that will pull cost of gain in the feedlot back down. literally, Eric, there's people talking about breaking triple digits, $100 cost of gain, where we were looking at 75 not too long ago. So I do think we'll reverse back at some point. If that happens, that will be supportive of feeder cattle prices. But, and I'll transition to some of my cattle today points with this, that hinges on us sustaining the good meat demand story. We do have a strong current beef demand story, but anything that rocks the boat on that front is going to depress the complex and probably depress feeder cattle more, because some of the work that Melissa McKendry, some of our listeners might remember, she's now at Michigan State, former student here, is beef demand signals at the retail level. They impact the entire industry, but they impact the feeder cattle level the most. So if beef demand is really strong, that's best for feeder cattle. They're the ones in position of the limited supply, which is seed stock-oriented production. But also when beef demand falls, they're the ones that take the hit the most. Look back to 2014 and 2016 and compare them. Feeder cattle prices swung hardest in those 2 years. Fed cattle, they swung, but not as hard in them. That's lessons consistent with that. So it's a long way of telling you, I do think this feeder cattle depression probably will come back once we alleviate cost of gain issues, but it's contingent on beef demand remaining strong.
And let us roll right into your remarks at Cattlemen's Day 2019, where you did talk up beef demand and what's ahead for the remainder of 2019. What were the primary points you were sharing there?
Yeah, so specific on the demand aspects I was sharing was in 2018, 8 of the 12 months were better than in 2017. So domestic beef demand was strong in 2018, and even more, U.S. beef export demand was stronger yet. So USMEF reports 15% increase in value of exports. That's really good. One of the notes I kind of drove home was we did that despite the fact we have less than 2% market share in China, and China represented 80% of the growth in beef trade last year. So we, quote-unquote, set records, had a great year in many ways. Without much of a seat in China, what could we do if we gained that is kind of the opportunity in front of us is the reason I highlight that. And everybody in the room knew, we would gain by getting more into China, so that's nothing new. China was the source of major growth, but we really weren't there, and we had a great year despite that. What could it have been if we had a bigger seat was the point. The Dr. Bear of me had to highlight, however, is there is ongoing talk about a recession, both domestically and abroad, and demand kind of paid the proverbial bills in 2018. If demand takes a hit in 2019 because of some macroeconomic shocks or we fail to improve trade relations or sustain current good trade relations, all of those will hamper cattle prices. I also admitted to the room, I've been saying that same thing of fear for at least 2 years and have been proven wrong so far. On behalf of the industry, I hope I keep warning that signal and am wrong, because that's a really good thing if we can sustain demand. But it is my job to kind of remind people one of these days we're going to have a demand reduction, and we got to be aware of it.
Still, and this was breaking as of late Friday, if in fact we're on the verge of finalizing a favorable trade deal with China, that has to be encouraging to the scene here, including beef sales. Yeah,
and I would argue that even if there wasn't meat components of that, which I would hope there is, and there may well be pork components specifically as part of that, but even if that wasn't it, if you reduce some general trade uncertainty with two major powers, which is U.S. and China, you're probably going to enhance investment, GDP in both countries and the like, and that has a notable impact on meat trade. So, I know there's a lot of econ jargon in that, but even if we don't get favorable beef terms in that trade deal, because I'll be a little surprised if immediately we do, because it's not the top line discussion going on, it will still be beneficial by calming down two countries, getting investment more comfortable, just reducing economic uncertainty in many ways is a good thing for the beef industry.
Well, among everything else that was going on last week, the USDA did, at long last, release that cattle inventory report. And how did you read that in general, Glynn?
On balance, there was no major surprises. I was pleased to see it, to your point on it is delayed and the industry benefits from it. But a couple of the main points I highlighted at Cattlemen's Day, heifer retention was down 3% from the prior year for the country. Here in Kansas, we were flat from the prior year. Moreover, if you couple that with the cattle on feed numbers, so once a quarter I can look at the gender breakout to see if more or less heifers as a percentage of placements is changing. Both of those measures are telling us that herd expansion is, I'll say, ceasing. I'm not sure I'm ready to say ceased, but it's definitely declining. The other number I pointed out was the beef cow number as well as the calf crop number for the country were both up 2% compared to the prior year. Neither of those are really surprises. But that's important to keep in mind because we're still increasing total supplies despite the fact we're no longer holding back as many heifers. That's the at least 2-year lag in the story. That probably drives commercial beef production being higher through at least 2020, maybe into 2021. So without really diving in any deeper, those would be the top line key points from that report. And none of them really were surprising, so I don't see them as market movers.
And you shared the latest on the value of gain for calves on summer grass looking ahead from the Beef Basis series. You passed that along to the audience at Cattlemen's Day? Right?
Yes. So I often at that event remind people how to use that tool to project their margins for anything in the feeder complex. And I'm looking at the potential summer grazing scenario, buying a yearling here in mid-April, using the Salina market. The projection was a $157 purchase price as of on Friday morning, and then looking to sell around Labor Day at maybe 950 pounds. The projected sales price was $145. If you do the math on that, that's an average daily gain of about 1.8. Sidebar, you can change the weights and dates to match your own enterprise. The value gain in the scenario I did is about $110 per 100 or $276 per head. That's quite attractive given normal cost situations. Most of our listeners know last year was anything but normal. We have had a lot of moisture recently, so people are optimistic that we'll have good gains and lower cost of gain this coming, but there's no guarantee in that. The reason I highlight that is twofold. Is one, if this is an enterprise you're interested in, please use the tool to push your own numbers and so forth. There might be a profit hedging opportunity there. If you think that's favorable and you're concerned about particularly that September price coming down once you pull the trigger on purchase, you could think about that given these margins. But before you do any of that, you need to compare it to your own cost of gain to figure out what the actual net is. And to that point, I highlighted the audience, if we have a spike in cost of gain or just the animals perform less than we expect, your margins are going to deteriorate real quick. Mm-hmm. The example I gave them was, what if you sell at 875 pounds instead of 950? So you put 75 pounds less on than you planned. Maybe this grass doesn't grow like we expect or whatever the case is. Well, that knocks $85 per head of revenue off immediately, probably with higher cost to boot in that story because you're going to try to supplement. So those net margins can change quick. Our listeners know that, but I'm just trying to highlight these tools to inform those decisions.
All right. And stocker feeders, run your own numbers there at beefbasis.org. Glynn, for these remarks, many thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
This week's cattle market commentary from Glynn Tonsor, livestock economist, K-State Research and Extension. Agriculture Today returns in a moment on the K-State Radio Network.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Each day this week, you'll be hearing about one of the 5 Kansas farm couples who will be formally recognized later this week as Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers. Now, to remind you, the Cooperative Extension Service here at K-State has sponsored this program since the 1920s, and for many years now in collaboration with Kansas Farmer Magazine. It honors farm couples who not only have excelled in production agriculture, but in environmental stewardship and community leadership as well. The class of 2018 was named in December and will be formally inducted in ceremonies this Friday here in Manhattan. Here's our first Master Farmer, Master Farm Homemaker success story. A fifth-generation farmer in the Greenleaf area of Washington County, Gary Hatesohl wasted little time embarking on his farming career. After graduating from North Central Kansas Vocational Technical School in 1979, Gary immediately returned to farm with his father. Along the way, he met Becky, who was from Topeka and was early into her 31-year career as an elementary teacher, 27 of those in eastern Washington County. Together, they grew the farm operation, today a 2,200-acre crops and cattle enterprise. Additionally, they've immersed themselves in community activities, especially with respect to 4-H and FFA locally. Gary reflects on what the farm was like during his youth.
Always been diversified. I remember as a little kid going and helping Grandpa milk cows even. So, I mean, we milked and we had cow-calf operation, had hogs for years and years and all kinds of crops and hay. And so everything just basically stayed the same except for the hogs are gone, the milk cows are gone.
So was it destined that you were going to farm in your mind anyway?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Never thought of anything else. Went 2 years of OTech at Beloit. So I've started then with the farm with my dad and my uncle at the time. And then I got a piece of 160 acres they let me have to farm. And things have just progressed since.
Bring Becky in here. You didn't grow up on a farm, did you?
I grew up on 80 acres of pasture ground west of Topeka. And it was just cut for prairie hay. And my dad had cows before I came around. So not really grew up in the farm, but grew up in rural atmosphere.
So you were able to adapt to a farm life fairly readily then?
I think so. Yeah. I never lived in the city, so I wasn't a city girl, and I liked horses and cows. I wasn't around them a lot, but enjoyed the farm aspect. So it wasn't totally foreign to me.
So the two of you started farming together. As it was at that time, was it crops and largely cattle, or were you still in the hogs?
No, I was still in the hogs back when we got married in 1986, and when the prices tanked in the hog market and down to 5 cents a hundred, that kind of thing, that's when we got rid of the hogs. We was all dirt lot and everything, and we couldn't compete with the big boys in the facilities, and I didn't want to expand that way, so we just stayed with the cattle route and crops. And Dad passed away in 94. I became the head decision maker at that time and planter operator and going from that direction.
And the scope of the operation is such, it's roughly now half crop ground, half pasture in that vicinity?
Roughly that. Yes, roughly that. Maybe a few more acres of crops.
And the crops, well, you run the gamut, don't you? Just about everything?
Everything. Corn, milo, soybeans, alfalfa, then hay. Do some conventional on places. Otherwise, I try to do a lot of minimum till, some no-till.
Becky, I do want to mention as well, in addition to serving as a farm partner, you taught school for over 3 decades?
I did. I started out in Topeka, and then I was fortunate enough when I found out I was engaged and coming up here to get a job in Hanover at the public school. And I was there for 27 years. Started with a 5th and 6th grade combination and went down as far as 2nd grade before I retired.
Does that blend well with farming activities by and
large?
large?
It did. Blended very well. I was able to come home. I could leave school at 4 o'clock and be home in time to check calves or help move him from one farm to the other. I had my summers virtually free to do what I needed to as far as helping out on the farm. So it blends very well.
Looking at your biography, it's clear that you're willing, as a farming operation, to adopt new things. You are looking very hard in employing, to some degree, variable rate technology, for instance, right now. Just share your philosophy as to how you like to advance on these kinds of things.
You mentioned variable rate technology. I've got in with our local co-op here several years back already, and they've been doing the grid sampling and things for me. But when it comes down to it, the way we've fertilized and maintained over the years is not going to pay me to variable rate fertilizer and things. So I'm basically putting the same recipes on all our farms instead of, doing the variable rate things. And so if I want to get really further into it, I'm going to have to update planner and all this other stuff to continue that. But we're always learning.
You've been willing to try new ideas.
Oh, yes.
Is the point.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Always trying something. I was seed dealer here for, 17, 18 years on my own. And so they had new things come out. I said, well, I'm not going to push them to my customers until I tried them. So I always try new seed and technologies here. If it didn't work, I didn't pass it on. And I told the company about it, what I thought of it. So that's all gone now. So now I rely on other people. We skipped corn for a number of years. So I went and talked to a few neighbors. I said, okay, what kind of corn do you plant? I want something that's good and it's going to work in this area. So there times I turned around and asked for help.
Talk a bit as well about the cattle operation. You've cow-calf and background a few calves as well?
Well, we just basically cow-calf operation. We sell our calves as yearlings or short yearlings, and commercial, basically Angus based. We threw in some Hereford to get some white-faced baldies and had real good luck with them. We've had Red Angus blood in the past. We've got a few Red Mama cows now, and now we're leaning more towards trying some Simmental Angus crops.
I want to look a bit off the farm here, and Becky, you and Gary have been pretty active voices for agriculture in various ways, in classroom settings and otherwise.
Oh, I think so. That was part of the fun of dating Gary when I was working in Topeka. It wasn't a city school, and I was able to bring things back that I saw up here. He had a lot to do with lesson planning in those days, because I would come up here, and I remember there was a farmer down the road that did a lot with horses still at that point in time. And so I got some pictures and some information about horses and brought that back to my classroom, and the kids really were, I didn't even know there were horses like that. It surprised them. And so I was able to try to forward agriculture-based issues inside my classrooms as well.
And was that a successful effort, do you feel?
Oh, I think so, yes.
Getting across?
Yes. Educated students as well as sometimes parents and the other teachers that were in the building as well about what was going on. I brought some different seed back at one point in time and tried to have the kids identify milo, wheat, corn, soybeans. They got the corn. That was about the only one that they knew what it was.
It's better than none at all.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And then when I came to Hanover, I was amazed at, even in a small town, how many of the students did not have a real grasp of production agriculture and where their foods was coming from and those sources. So that was kind of my thing, and important to me to bring the agriculture into the classroom.
Now, with your two children, you were also deeply involved in 4-H, correct, mm-hmm. as well as FFA, extension activities in general likewise?
Yep. We
were. In fact, we were both 4-H members. Of course, that was very important to us in our life. And of course, I was big in FFA. So, of course, kids, you need to try this, and they both enjoyed it and succeeded in both programs. And back in the early 80s, we helped reorganize our FFA Alumni Association at Washington and got that up and going again. It's one of the strongest ones in the state and the nation. I'm very proud of that we kept it going all these years, and everybody's a firm believer in the FFA program up here, so we always support it because they've done excellent in their state and national things over the last number of years, and it's a big thing for us in here.
Those are just examples of any number of ways that the two of you are very much devoted to community support. The community is meaningful to both of you.
It is. Our small towns and our rural areas are just amazing places to grow up and to raise children, and anything we can do to help support that community idea, it just needs to stay as part of the rural agriculture aspect.
Well, it, by all indications, has been a successful run. And what's next for the Hatesohl operation as you look ahead the next 5-10 years or so?
Oh, that's quite a question.
Definitely maintenance.
Yeah, I say staying on the maintenance side of things, and if we can expand here and there.
Hopefully a little expansion possibilities here and there. I can't quite get him tucked into llamas or alpacas, but...
I hope I won't go that crazy, but yeah, you're trying to do something a little different maybe here and there, but otherwise we can pass it on to Adam and his family, or Kelsey and whoever wants to take over at that time, and hopefully have things build up that'll keep going for them, That's our goals.
From Washington County, Gary and Becky Hatesohl. Tomorrow we'll tell you about another Kansas Master Farmer, Master Farm Homemaker couple in the 2018 class. From Thomas County, Tom and Judy McCarty. This is Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggle to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Agriculture Today continues now here on the K-State Radio Network. Glad to have you aboard. Eric Atkinson here. Now to today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, referring to President Trump's expected meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping to conclude that new trade agreement, USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue said at the Commodity Classic in Orlando on Friday that a Trump-Xi meeting could end successfully or very detrimentally for American agriculture. Perdue said he believes the agreement with China could double or triple exports for a wide range of U.S. products beyond soybeans, but he added that the president wants China to agree to non-tariff items that will make those big purchases possible. Here's more from the USDA's Rod Bain.
As Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue told reporters at Commodity Classic in Orlando Friday, it's not just about China boosting purchase amounts of American soybeans.
There have been many other commodities on the discussion level that we've brought to the Chinese that they've brought back.
So Secretary Perdue says in the context of a trade deal and in reducing the U.S. trade deficit to China,
I think you'll see a broad array of agricultural commodities, not only the cereals, feed grains, soybeans, sorghum. I think you may see rice, beef, livestock, ethanol, DDGs, those kind of things. There's a pretty broad swath there.
And while acknowledging there is still much work for negotiators of both nations to do to reach a deal, the Secretary also offered what he hopes is the end result.
A magnificent conclusion to the U.S.-China negotiations that will involve doubling and tripling our former export to China.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Now, the meeting specifics between the president and Xi have not yet been announced, although there are widespread rumors it would take place at the president's resort in Florida here in the month of March. Farmers will have to make their decisions based on market signals, according to the secretary, noting that they have always had to make decisions while dealing with uncertainty. And this year, those uncertainties, he says, may include the relationship with China. While the timeline for approval of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is still uncertain, the top U.S. trade official told U.S. lawmakers last week that failure to approve it will have potentially far-reaching impacts. Quoting here U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, if USMCA does not pass, it would be a catastrophe across the country. He was testifying before the House Ways and Means Committee when making those comments. He added it would be very bad on every level, way beyond economics, again in his words. That was a point that Lighthizer underscored to several lawmakers from several states who focused their questions on the trade deal with the U.S. two closest neighbors. Failure to approve USMCA would say that we don't want a consensus and that we don't want to stand up for our workers and our farmers and our ranchers. He thinks that there's no less than that at stake, according to Lighthizer, and further quoting him, if it does not pass, you have no credibility at all with China, and you would have no credibility on any deals with any other trading partners. Again, his words to the House Ways and Means Committee. And Illinois farmers and applicators will join the ranks of those facing additional regulations aimed at limiting off-target movement of dicamba herbicide this summer. The Illinois Department of Agriculture announced on Friday it will require special local needs labels, including new restrictions that include a firm calendar cutoff date and additional definitions for sensitive areas for the use of the herbicide dicamba on soybeans in Illinois for this upcoming growing season. On February 15th, that agency notified the manufacturers of the 3 dicamba-containing products approved for over-the-top application to dicamba-tolerant soybeans that additional application restrictions will be required for the 2019 growing season. The affected formulations of dicamba are Ingenia by BASF, Extendamax with Vapor Grip technology by Bayer, and Fexapan plus Vapor Grip technology by DuPont Corteva. Arkansas also finalized a cutoff date and other application precautions beyond the federal dicamba label. Specifically, Illinois has implemented a cutoff date now of June the 30th for application to dicamba-tolerant soybeans. And earlier in the week, Arkansas lawmakers approved that state plant board proposal, May the 25th, as a cutoff date for dicamba applications in Arkansas. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and now it's on to this week's edition of Tree Tales. Standing by with that is K-State Forester Jaron Tyndall. Jaron?
Believe it or not, Kansas has a long history of professional forestry. In the early years of settlement, the state's Horticultural Society and Agricultural College took part in a concerted effort to provide our newly established farms with woodlots and windbreaks. These tree plantings were valued very highly by that first generation of settlers, who knew what life was like on a treeless prairie with little natural refuge from the elements, and scarce supplies of timber for fuel and farm repairs. The following is an excerpt from an 1880 forestry report, which sheds light on that era's budding efforts to improve the quality of life in our state. In forestry, the first thing to be considered is the place where the tree plantation shall be located. Every person will wish to have around his buildings a sufficient number of trees to afford shade and protection from the winds, and the owner can afford to go to a larger expense to suitably prepare the soil for the limited number of trees that he may desire for shade and protection than he can for a larger plantation, and he may locate his buildings where it may be most desirable. But for the main plantation, the place selected should be the best and most fertile spot on his farm, and if possible, where the soil is naturally moist. We are living in a state where the climatic conditions on the whole are not favorable to the growth of forests, or they would have covered the soil. Land itself is of little value. It is the people who live on it, and the civilization with its attendant blessings that they enjoy, which render land of value. Forestry in Kansas will prove to be no haphazard, makeshift undertaking to be pursued at random on refuge land, but if successful, must be an intelligent, scientific application of the principles of tree life and growth, conducted with a due regard to the conditions of soil and climate, and dictated by a full appreciation of the importance of the object. Surprisingly little has changed in the practical aspects of forestry in the past 140 years, but its broad application during that time has made a pervasive change to the state we live in today. Opportunities still exist for beautifying and diversifying our rural landscape, so if you'd like to discuss what farm forestry can look like in the 21st century, just give me a call and I'll be happy to fill you in. This has been Jaron Tyndall with the Kansas Forest Service, bringing you another Tree Tale.
Right, Jaron, many thanks. And you can contact him through the Kansas Forest Service. Check out their website at kansasforests.org for that exact contact information. We have an opportunity to remind you once again you can listen to the podcast version of our broadcast simply by visiting agtoday.net, and you can simply subscribe to the podcast right there by tapping that button right on the front. Brand new episodes of the program will automatically arrive on your device every weekday. Start by going to agtoday.net. This week's 4-H segment coming your way next on Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. The Kansas 4-H SpaceTech Action Team, Kansas 4-H Youth Development, and KSU Polytechnic in Salina are sponsoring a Kansas 4-H SpaceTech Training on April 27th on the KSU Polytechnic Campus. Northwest Area 4-H Specialist Deryl Waldren says that teenaged 4-H members, parents, 4-H leaders, extension staff, and educators working with youth who are interested in 4-H rocketry and unmanned aerial systems project areas are encouraged to attend this hands-on training. Deryl, an opportunity for especially those older youth to participate in a train-the-trainer type program dealing with rocketry and unmanned aerial systems.
Yes, Kansas 4-H and the Kansas 4-H SpaceTech Action Team will be working and partnering with KSU Polytechnic, which is the new name for K-State Salina. And we've worked with them previously, but it's been several years, so we'll be teaming up to do a training on the K-State Polytechnic Campus in Salina on April 27th.
You're going to do this, I guess, a couple of different ways. They'll have a chance to do rocketry and unmanned aerial systems and then kind of flip-flop that.
Yes, so we'll have some general tours of the Unmanned Aerial Systems building and the Aviation Center in the morning to start off, and then we'll break out into two sets of workshops, one that's dealing with rocketry and the other one dealing with unmanned aerial systems, or commonly known as drones. We'll have lunch, and then we'll do a flip-flop where they'll get to experience the other workshop. And this one's a little bit different in that we'll be providing them information that they'll be able to hopefully go back and work with 4-H groups back in their local county. This one is not really designed to be an adult-child experience, which is what we've been doing at the Kansas Cosmosphere in Hutchinson. So this one's more designed to be like the old learning what you need to know about rocketry in order to teach it in a 4-H group. Unmanned aerial systems are coming online fast, and we're trying to gear up to give people what they need to have to teach that particular project.
And that's why you're looking at that 12-plus age range.
Yes, because if it were an adult-child experience, it could be 9, 10, 11, but you sort of need to be probably 13 and above to get the experience so that they can teach it back to other kids.
In terms of the training itself, what type of things will they be covering?
Well, they'll get the whole 9 yards, and they'll actually get to make a rocket, and depending on weather, may or may not get to launch it, because that gets to be a little more difficult because the parts have to dry, and they often aren't dry enough to be able to launch them. But it's just going to be a guess on the weather, because if it's exceedingly windy, can't do a launch. If it's too windy, then we'll have to move the unmanned aerial systems inside to a hangar, because the little ones would just blow away. The little drones would just blow away outside. So we're hoping for a lovely spring day that day with no wind. We'll see how that goes.
And that's kind of a learning experience in itself, the fact that not all days are good days to fly.
That is correct, especially in Kansas, and especially lately.
So what else are they going to be looking at?
Then under unmanned aerial systems, our plan is that they'll have time to actually work with a small drone in pairs and have to actually navigate a course with the drone, so that they're getting to experience some real hands-on, as well as some of the other requirements. The FAA has a lot of requirements in order to use unmanned aerial systems. So we're hoping to, if it's a nice day, we hope to be outside in the pavilion, is what the KSU Polytechnic calls it. That's the big cage that they have, so that they don't have to get special FAA permission to have an unmanned aerial system outside. And if it's, like I said, bad weather, we'll be inside in a hangar. There's an issue there. Some of the other things people need to know about, we're going to limit it to 30 in each of the workshops, so it could be a maximum of 60. The registration fee costs $25 and includes the lunch, the breaks, the 2 workshops, workshop materials, and training team costs. We will have it unless we don't meet the minimum numbers, and registration is currently open, and they can go to the Kansas 4-H website now and click on the homepage and hit What's Hot and click on the link for this particular training.
And that number would be for youth and older adults?
Yes, it could also be parents, volunteer leaders, extension staff, teen leaders who are working with youth and clubs.
They will also then learn how to take this information back and share it with other club members?
Yes, that's our hope, that they take it back and share it locally so that the program can expand and grow back in their local 4-H program.
So this is all really just part of that one project area, just kind of a couple of separate parts of that area?
It all falls underneath SpaceTech, and under SpaceTech we have 5 different projects, and they are rocketry, unmanned aerial systems, astronomy, computers, and robotics, and those are the 5 we're using right now.
So anybody who has an interest in that really should probably check this out, because it sounds like not only will they have a learning experience, but they'll also have a chance to really see some of this stuff in action, hopefully.
Yes, and even if we, it still will be valuable, even if we don't get to, launch any rockets, and they'll get to actually work hands-on on an unmanned aerial vehicle or a drone, because, as I said, we will be inside if the weather's not nice.
Is this something that you have offered in the past?
We have offered the rocketry and robotics previously, and astronomy and computers, but with unmanned aerial systems coming online, this is our 2nd year with it, we've not done a specific train-the-trainer for unmanned aerial systems. So this is a little bit new there. So we picked it with rocketry because rocketry is always popular, and the UASs, or the unmanned aerial systems, is a new one and exciting, and a lot's going to be happening there the next 5 years.
And something that the youth are interested in.
Oh, I think they're interested, because drones are here to stay, and they'll continue to become more integrated into our lives year by year.
And really, they're even starting to use them for agricultural purposes.
Oh, they're highly used in agricultural purposes now, in precision ag, as it's called. They're everywhere out there.
Again, if people want more information, they can find that online.
They can at the Kansas 4-H website, which is www.kansas4-h.org. That's www.kansas4h-org. or they could contact me, Deryl Waldren, and my phone number is 785-462-6281, or my email is dwaldren@ksu.edu, DWALDREN@ksu.edu.
And you would suggest they go to the website, soon get registered so that you get a better head count.
Yes, and I think registration will close about April 15th at 11:59 p.m. It's online registration, so you click on the link and you fill it out, hit submit, and then you're all registered.
And the nice thing here is this is just a one-day event.
One-day event from roughly 8:30 to 4 o'clock.
All right, sounds like a fun event. Hopefully people will participate.
We hope so, too.
That's Northwest Area 4-H Specialist Deryl Waldren. Again, information about the Kansas 4-H SpaceTech Training on April 27th at the KSU Polytechnic Campus in Salina can be found online at kansas4h.org under the What's Hot section. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.